Hi, Relaxed Recaps here. Today I'm going to explain an American psychological horror thriller film called Gerald's Game. Spoilers ahead, watch out, and take care. Jesse and Gerald are a married couple who are going through a difficult time in their relationship and haven't spent much time together lately. So, to rekindle their romance, they're on their way to a secluded house in Alabama. When driving there, Gerald is already excited and stroking his wife's legs, but Jesse isn't comfortable with it. Moments later, they're startled to see a dog eating a possum in the middle of the street. Luckily, Gerald stops on time and honks to chase the dog away, but Jesse worries about the dog and thinks it must be starving. After a long drive, the couple finally arrives at the beautiful lake house. Jesse rushes in to explore and discovers the fridge is already stocked for them. She then pulls out some meat to feed the starving dog that they saw earlier. Meanwhile, Gerald is in the bathroom taking a Viagra pill, hoping to satisfy his wife. He comes outside and notices Jesse feeding the meat to the dog, but Gerald is a bit upset because the meat is a highly expensive cut of Kobe beef. Nonetheless, he lets it go and the couple goes inside to have some fun while leaving the door open. Jesse then changes into a suggestive nightgown and removes its tag, which she places on a shelf above the bed. Gerald appears with a handcuff, which surprises Jesse, but she doesn't react to anything. She binds his wife to the bed and explains that he didn't want to use cheap handcuffs because they break easily. He then takes another Viagra and places his glass of water on the shelf. Gerald begins to act out a stranger rape fantasy, ordering her to scream for help and claiming that no one will hear her. This makes Jesse uncomfortable, but she goes along with it. When Gerald becomes more forceful, she asks him to stop, but he thinks Jesse's just playing along. She eventually kicks him off and requests that she be uncuffed. This creates a furious disagreement between the two, and Gerald accuses her of not even trying to reignite their romance. Jesse asks him to open the cuffs again, but Gerald resists and becomes more aggressive. When he comes close to her, she bites his face furiously. Jesse ultimately tells him that their relationship isn't going to work like this. But hearing this, Gerald starts playing the victim, blaming their split on her inability to make love. All of a sudden, Gerald begins to grip his chest as his breath tightens, and just like that, he collapses dead on top of Jesse. She initially assumes he's playing games with her, but soon she realizes he's no longer alive. She then tries to wake him up with her feet, but instead causes him to fall and bang his head on the floor. Jesse shouts for Gerald to wake up and even screams for help, but a pool of blood begins to flow from Gerald's head. After a few hours, Jesse realizes she's in a dangerous scenario. Her screams are ineffective because the house is secluded with no neighbors in sight. She starts hearing some rustling outside the open window and light footsteps entering the house. However, it turns out to be the stray dog from earlier. As the dog approaches, Jesse understands that he's hungry and seeks to feed on Gerald's body. She yells at the dog to back off, but the hungry dog ignores her and bites Gerald's arm. Jesse then bursts into tears when Gerald wakes up with a wounded arm. She's relieved and asks that he quickly uncuff her. However, she notices that the dead person is still lying down. She freezes in shock, realizing that the man speaking to her is only a delusion. Imaginary Gerald scolds her for wasting time calling for help when no one is nearby. He also calls her a coward for escaping reality, inventing parallel realities and manifesting ghosts. Jesse then becomes enraged and suddenly, she yanks her hand out of the restraints and is free. Nevertheless, she quickly realizes that this is her other delusion and that she is still cuffed to the bed. Soon, her two inner hallucinations begin to argue with each other. Fake Gerald says her hand won't fit through the cuff, but fake Jesse thinks she can. She also urges the real Jesse to give it a shot, as her time is running short. It'll be dark in a few hours, and she may die from dehydration. These two remind Jesse that Gerald had placed a cup of water on the shelf. She tries to take the cup only to discover that she's unable to drink from it. They then remind Jesse that the tag on her new clothing item is still on the shelf. She then makes a straw from the tag and is finally able to drink water from the cup. Moments later, Jesse soon falls asleep and wakes up in the middle of the night due to the dog barking. She's startled to see a tall, disfigured, obscured figure in front of her, which scares the dog away. His hands are almost claws, and he holds a bag filled with bones and trinkets. Then, the fake Gerald informs her that he's the Moonlight Man, a metaphor for Jesse approaching death. Jesse, on the other hand, believes he is a hallucination and tries to calm down by closing her eyes. Just then, Gerald calls her a mouse, which causes her to recall something from the past. The scene then shifts to a flashback of a 12-year-old Jessie who is on a vacation with her family at a lake house. Her father frequently calls her Mouse out of affection. It's revealed that Jessie and her mother are distant and don't have a loving relationship. Her mother and siblings board a boat to see the eclipse, but Jessie and her father stay at the house. Her father informs Jessie that the dress she's wearing makes her look like a proper young lady. He then suggests that she sit on his lap as she used to when she was little. The girl innocently obliges, but her sick father begins masturbating himself while she sits on his lap. Back in the present, Jessie awakens from this nightmare in excruciating pain since her blood flow has been cut off. Imaginary Gerald then asks why Jessie never shared this memory of her father with him. Jessie claims it's too difficult to speak about and that she wants to forget it, but Imaginary Jessie informs her that this is exactly why she married an older man and a lawyer like her father. Jessie is still haunted by guilt and shame over what happened. She begins to place blame on everyone except her father. She even justifies his horrible behavior by claiming he never touched her and only touched himself with her on his lap. Jessie closes her eyes once again and begins reliving her childhood. She's in her room this time, having returned from the traumatic lake trip. Her father approaches her and apologizes for what he did, but he tactically threatens her not to disclose it to anyone. He implies that it was her fault for luring him and that if she ever tells her mother about it, she will most probably resent her. Jessie awakens the next morning to find the strange man licking her feet, but she soon realizes that it's the dog that's gnawing on her foot. When Jessie kicks the dog away, he goes to eat more of Gerald. Jessie's lips had become chapped as a result of dehydration. Meanwhile, Imaginary Gerald begins to scare her of how she'll be discovered dead if someone even finds her. He warns her that when darkness falls, the Moonlight Man will return and kill her. Later that evening, Jessie has another dream in which she meets her younger self. She apologizes to a younger version of herself for failing to take a stand against the abuse. Jessie admits that anytime she looked at her younger sister, she felt terrible and frightened that her father would do the same to her. The younger Jessie reminds her that she has all she needs to go through this hardship. This brings back memories of Jessie at dinner that night in the lake house. As her mother asks if Jessie had fun with her father, Jessie squeezes the glass cup so hard that it shatters in her hand. Her father helps her, and her mother just stares at her, confused but concerned. This vision leads Jessie to realize that she can cut her hand with the glass and then use the blood to get out of the handcuffs. She raises her gaze to the glass resting on the plank. The Imaginary Jessie agrees with the plan, but tells her that it would be painful. Gerald, on the other hand, believes it's beneficial since the blood will serve as a lubricant. He cautions her one more time, to which Jessie answers that she has no other alternative. However, she needs to finish everything quickly because she's already dehydrated. Jessie immediately snatches the cup and smashes it on the rack. She then cuts her wrist and the palm of her hand with the shard. Then she struggles desperately to get free from the restraints while almost skinning herself alive. Jessie almost has a heart attack when she sees her skin hanging off her hand, but she doesn't waste time and moves over to the other side to release herself. She grabs her cell phone with her feet, only to discover that it's dead and has to be charged. She carries the bed over to the counter and unlocks herself with the key. She then wraps her hand to prevent further blood loss. However, she soon becomes lightheaded and falls on the floor. Sometime later, Jessie awakens to see the dog trying to gnaw her arm off. She chases the dog away only to discover her husband's face bitten on the floor. As she gets up, the dog senses something in the hallway. He growls and then immediately runs away. Just then, Jessie notices the Moonlight Man in the corridor again and decides to approach him. He wants to add Jessie's jewelry to his collection, so she gives him her wedding ring. Finally, alive and free, Jessie drives away in her car, waving goodbye to the Imaginary Gerald. But she's having difficulty keeping awake while driving. She drifts, then finds herself in one of her dreams, with a blood-stained sky. Suddenly, the Moonlight Man is in the back seat. He approaches Jessie and whispers the word "mouse" into her ears. Spooked by this, Jessie rear-ends the car into a tree, which causes a collision, but luckily she's still conscious and alive. After she honks her car for a while, some nearby people come and rescue her. 6 months later, Jessie sits down with her messed up hand to write a letter to her 12-year-old self. She lied to the police after the accident, claiming she had amnesia. She knows more clearly than anyone that a distressing incident might drive one to wipe out a few memories. The doctors have confirmed that Gerald's death was due to a heart attack. Thanks to Gerald's life insurance, Jessie's able to live somewhat a normal life. Using the insurance money, Jessie establishes a foundation for abused children like her. She's no longer silent about what happened to her as a child. However, she claims that no police ever discovered her wedding ring. Meanwhile, almost every single day, she remembers being trapped and is tormented by the same question: what happened to her wedding ring? Did she truly give it to a ghost who she mistook for her death? The question that neither the cops nor the reporters on the scene can answer. She's disturbed by his presence every night, where her vision of Moonlight Man has red flashing eyes and sometimes doesn't even have a head. One day, Jessie reads in the newspaper that a man named Raymond Andrew Jorbet has been arrested. He's a crypt keeper who vandalizes graveyards by breaking into mausoleums and stealing jewelry. According to reports, Raymond gouged out the corpse's eyes and other body parts. He also suffers from necrophilia, which means he has intercourse with dead bodies, specifically males in his case. Over time, he progressed to killing people and chopping off their body parts, some of which he eats and others of which he stores. It's revealed that Raymond has acromegaly as well, which causes abnormal growth of numerous body parts. The police discovered his sister and her husband, as well as additional collections of body parts scalped and cannibalized. After reading all of this, Jessie realizes that the ghost she saw at the house was none other than Raymond, yet she's unsure why the Moonlight Man did not attack her. Perhaps he was more interested in the dead than the living. Following this, Jessie decides to pay a visit to the notorious killer to find out the truth. For 6 months, the Moonlight Man has been haunting her, and she finally thinks it's time to confront him. In the final scene, Jessie arrives at the courthouse where Raymond's hearing is taking place. A reporter reveals that he hasn't spoken a single word since his imprisonment. However, when he sees Jessie, Raymond unties himself from the zip ties and mocks her, saying, "You're not real, you're only made of moonlight." Jessie too stares at him in the eyes and begins to see both her evil father and husband in him. She then confronts her fears and tells Raymond that he is much smaller than she remembers. Jessie realizes that she had let her fears develop into something far larger than she could bear. The film then concludes with her walking out with her sunglasses on and the sun shining brightly. This signifies the end of Jessie's eclipse and the beginning of a new chapter in her life. If you like this video, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you can watch more videos like this. Thanks for watching.